Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast. A podcast where we watch a movie and then we talk about ice skating. My name's David, and I'm not much of a skater myself. This is a cultural divide. We'll get into this.
My name's Sam, and watch me as I kneecap my two closest rivals live on air.
And I'm Ross, former bodyguard to Chuck Norris.
This week, we watched the 2017 movie, Tonya, which is the, how would you describe this? Absolutely not particularly biographical
mockumentary, pseudo-factual mockumentary based on real events. But not really.
About Tonya Harding, who, and basically the story is, and we'll get into this if you've seen the movie, you know, the ice skater, the Olympian, who allegedly, and this is something the movie attempts to sort of, well, not shedding a light on whatsoever, allegedly was complicit in plans to, what's the generous term here, to kneecap like a rival. For the Olympic team, but apparently, like this is really dark. I was reading today, like apparently some of the early plans were to just straight up murder this other woman, like so that she couldn't be a rival for the Olympics. There were all sorts of like some dark shit.
Like anything, when you get to the top level, like this podcast, it becomes incredibly cutthroat. Yeah. I'll take you both out.
The view from the top is wonderful, but Jesus, it's a long way down, guys.
It's a long way, exactly. And you guys have got a long way to fall, so I would be worried. But I do think that when it comes to this movie, it's almost counterfactual in a lot of ways, isn't it? Like, it just kind of doing what it likes. It doesn't really care if this actually happened in this way whatsoever, and the movie's all the better for it. So, like, that's fine.
Yeah. It really does ascribe to that rule we talk about where, like, based on true events is great. It's fantastic, I'm sure. But, like, guess what? Make a movie. And this is the perfect example of, like, somebody taking a real story, a real event, and being like, I could make a really good movie about this and not being too worried about offending anyone or, like, not being 100% accurate. And it's a bit irreverent and it's a bit silly.
But the things that we're usually like, oh, it's fine, fuck it, is like, things that happened in the 12th century. Do you know what I mean? Or things that happened not 40 years ago. And that's where it's this movie just really is just fast and loose with the facts. And maybe not just the facts, maybe just like the interpretation of actually trying to portray these people as like, sympathetic, and Tonya Harding being, whereas it's pretty clear that she was quite significantly involved, a bit more anyway than we get to see in this movie. Yeah.
We can get into that in a minute. Let's start off talking about ice skating, right? Now, obviously, I'm a British man in my 30s. Huh?
Ever been?
I have. We went with school. I actually quite enjoyed it. There's a rink in Doncaster.
How old were you when you went ice skating?
12.
You don't strike me as the coordinated type for ice skating.
It's all relative, I guess. I had a set of rollerblades when I was a kid. I never liked skateboarding. I've not got the coordination to like balance like that. But when it's like, I had a set of rollerblades and they were fine.
Oh, I'd love to see you rollerblade.
Sorry, babe. I've seen Dave.
I'm low key quite offended here. I know I'm not like super coordinated, right? I'm not any sort of athlete, right?
Ross, were you there? Were you there in?
Look who's talking to me. Fucking imagine you on fucking one massive ice skate.
I was
his fanny pack and his tie-dyed t-shirt on roller.
I can see you fucking driving the Zamboni, Ross. I can't see you ice skating.
Ross, were you there in Carlisle is it Bitts Park behind the castle? When I think it's the first and only time that I've seen Dave try to do any kind of sporting thing. And he looked like someone. He looked like a puppet. He looked like someone who was blind was controlling a puppet. Just wildly, just arms flailing and like, and no offense, Dave, but I think that's the vision I've got for you on ice skates as well.
I would argue, Sam, that's a little outdated. I haven't been ice skating any time recently. In fact,
or done any sport in any time recently. Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you? Anyway, my personal assassination and insults aside,
I told you, I'm taking you both down.
I know how. By the way, I didn't try to kneecap either of you with this speech.
Oh no! Again, it would take some sort of like coordination. And we all know it's not your strong suit.
It's okay. It's okay.
Anyway.
Listen.
If, dear listener, you hadn't realised that the three men on this fucking podcast aren't athletes, then I think you need to look at your own life. Now,
I mean, I never went pro, but
Yeah, take that.
Pro
take that,
what,
listener.
Carrying
Sort
hay
yourself
bales, mucking out cows. Pro at what?
Hey, listen, Dave.
Come on, you two,
Ross,
are
this.
just as bad as me, and you know
Ross,
it.
I've
Shut
got
up.
this. I've got this. Those are two very legitimate Irish sports, right? And I will not have you denigrate.
Wow.
Sorry about that.
zing. Okay, man.
Ooh,
I honestly
racism
feel
is
so-
strong.
This is
Have
great.
we
Not-
not done
not
enough to the
that
nation
one.
of Ireland, Sam? Has the nation of England not done enough to the nation of Ireland?
Jesus Christ.
This is
Got
strange.
way more
This
political.
is a
Ice
brilliant.
skating.
Right, wow.
I went once as a kid. My knowledge
Right.
of ice skating, my experience of ice skating, it kind of boils down to the one time we went as kids with school and the Mighty Ducks. That's my only
Yes.
window into
100%,
ice skating.
And to slightly undercut all the things I've just been saying, I'm actually quite scared of going ice skating. I've never been ice skating, and I really do not want to because it just feels
You don't
like
want to strap knives to your feet
Never
and get in a rink with them.
I'm going to fall over. I'm going to have my fingers chopped off, at the very least, and it's just going to be a horrible experience all around. So I think I'm.
Never have I heard Sam say a more Sam thing in my life.
There we go.
I'm a bit scared of going ice skating. Yeah, it's a bit scary, isn't it, Sam? You just stay there with your hot chocolate, yeah, and you stay safe.
I will hold the coats quite happily and eat hot dogs or whatever you do at ice skating. You know, that's the.
It seems to be like the American thing. It's like basically a bowling alley, but there's an ice rink rather than lanes. It seems to be the same thing.
Yes.
Like the concessions seem to be more or less the same as you would.
That
see
does
in any other...
does seem from 80s movies. 100%. That seems
If
to be
80s
the
movies
thing.
have taught me anything, and they haven't, it's that all American pop culture is the same.
Yeah. So,
Have you
ice
ever been
skating.
ice skating, Ross?
Yes, I have. I was just about to say I've actually been twice. And
Hell.
those
Didn't
two
realise we had a
occurrences-
ringer.
Those two occurrences contrast wildly. So, like yourself, Dave, I went when I was really, really young in school. I think I was about maybe 15, 16. Went, bloody loved it. I was gliding on that ice, whoosh, whoosh, whiz. And then I went again in about, I think it was maybe 2015, 2016. When I'm a grown-ass adult, put on a bit of weight since then, and I was the most uncoordinated little fucking beach ball about on that ice. It got
I think
to a
also
point.
like. Go on.
I'm gonna blame two things here, and neither of them are me. I'm gonna blame one, the ice skates, because they felt a little dull to me. I think I needed sharper ice skates.
What
And
we
two,
saw in
the
this
ice.
movie, you know,
The
if
ice
they
was-
weren't.
yeah. Hey, you know what I mean, Sam? If you're not strapped
Skates
down
aren't
properly.
right, 100%.
The other thing was the ice, because it was very wet, like a lot of puddles in the ice. And I was like, well, surely this should be frozen. This isn't up to code. That's why I'm filling. It's not up
It's
to
not
code.
up to code.
I
This
think
isn't
part of it
regulation
also-
ice.
Part of it also is like when you're a teenager, you've got the confidence. If you aren't really afraid of falling down, and apart from Sam, you aren't
Yeah.
really afraid
Oh,
of
I
falling
was.
down and getting hurt.
100%.
And part of like, and again, rollerblading is the same. Part of like staying upright is your momentum of moving forward. When you stop, that's when there's a fat, out of shape piece of shit. That's when you're going to fall over, is because
Yeah.
you're then balancing on knives. And
I
if you're
fell over
moving,
in the most embarrassing, worst way.
right
We
on
got
your
to a
bum.
point- worse. So I got to the point. I can't remember how I got in this position, but essentially I slipped, and basically my leg sort of went out wide a little bit, and then. But I'm bent over, sort of like I'm sort of like in a downward dog.
Ross, this is starting to read like a court transcript.
It's honestly like a downward dog, but my legs are a bit more splayed, and I didn't have the core strength to sort of like pull my legs in. So my legs kept like sliding further and further apart. And so I don't have the core strength to pull my legs back in and sort of right myself. So I've got two choices here: do the splits and fucking tear, the space between my arsehole and my ball sack, or I fall forward.
Wow.
I fell forward and I was just soaked head to toe because
Oh, man.
it wasn't regulation ice.
Because the ice wasn't up to code. Unbelievable.
It wasn't regulation ice.
I
should have
hope you
sued.
sued. I hope you sued. I really hope
But
you did.
it seems to be a much bigger, and again, this is from movies, but because of ice hockey as well. But like, it seems to be, especially in certain parts of America, it's like a much bigger like thing. On a par with bowling, people just go ice skating, and it's in everything. And
Yeah. But figure skating, though, this is like obviously not just a bunch of kids going eating hot dogs. This is serious.
isn't.
This is serious shit. Like this is a really, obviously there's a lot of physicality and there's a lot of skill and talent in it as well. But
it's ballet meets beauty pageants on ice a little bit.
That's kind of the impression that you get, isn't it, of that?
Because you've got the costumes and you've got the music and you've got the routines that you have. So it's like gymnastics on ice rather than ballet on ice, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But you have the judges, and it's, which I suppose you have in gymnastics as well. But it's just less about your established things. I mean, it looks really cool, and it's definitely one of those things. Even though you're looking at it, you're like, well, I couldn't do that, obviously.
Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard to appreciate sometimes actually what they're doing. So this is where this movie, I think, was a fun education of like, okay, so you know a little bit about ice skating. You know, you've had the Olympics on for 0.3 of a second, and they were doing it then, and you moved on in your life.
You've watched Blades of Glory.
Time to watch the Olympics.
Exactly. I know, who cares? So with this movie, I thought was really fun because it was like, okay, we're going to explain some of this stuff to you. We're also going to give you like an insight into the world and especially that kind of Americana take on it, which is really fun. And then, of course, we have just the most batshit insane story of fame and, like corruption and all the other stuff that comes with everything. Tonya Harding, who I didn't really know that much. I knew about it from like memes and Family Guy episodes or whatever, but I didn't understand fully what was going on with this. And also, just Jesus Christ, this woman's had a terrible life from birth. Just
this is what I was going to start talking about, like when we started the episode, and that, like, again, another episode of Dadcast here. But now, if there's a movie or a TV show, like me and Amy were watching Black Mirror there, and basically because something happens to the kids in like the third episode, like, okay, let's skip this one. We'll watch it later when we don't have a toddler that's fucking like the apple of our eye. So at the start of this movie, where you see the horrible life she has, and even though they put this like sort of humorous sort of tint to it, it's still like. I like 20 odd minutes in, I was considering whether or not I want to keep watching this because it genuinely breaks my fucking heart. And it doesn't get much better for her, but like especially when it's a kid, and that point where where the dad leaves her, he's they've split up, he's leaving, and the mother is just she obviously has no love for the child, and it's, again, as a parent, you're like, this is killing me, and I cannot abide it. Even in make believe, I can't abide it.
It's funny how we look at these movies, isn't it, and how having kids has turned you two into, it's like a different
weak, so weak.
Well, not even that, but it's the way that you view things. Whereas, obviously, I'm a single man with no children, so I looked at this in the view of like, wow, adults can be shitty to kids, and obviously, like, I wasn't beaten as a child or forced to be an athlete because that would have been a no-go. That would have been
no, that's evidence
for anyone. Exactly.
Certainly not the last one.
You don't say.
But maybe some beating would have got you there, rather.
Certain things on this ring true. Obviously, the dad leaving and stuff, and it's like, so I'm looking at it more from the viewpoint of the child and more of like a. So it's interesting how you sort of like.
I think
can't compare the two.
Yeah, I think
it is quite harsh, and it's quite a blunt opening to a movie, I would say. In that we don't get like tons of ice skating, we get the voiceover, which I think works generally. In this movie.
Oh, the whole presentation of this, I want to talk about that because I think the whole presentation of this movie is where its strength lies. Like, the subject matter is interesting and tragic and entertaining all the way through. And I have some quibbles about how that's applied different subject matters. It's not all equal, I don't think. But how this movie is telling this story, I think, is why this is a fantastic film, isn't it? Like, it's one of those movies that is happy to be aware that it's a movie. We have the talking at the camera, we have freeze frames, we have really interesting use of music in different places, and like cutaways. Like, this is a fully a self-aware film that's willing to use all the different tools that it has to tell its story, as opposed to something that could be actually quite static and incredibly dark. Like, this is, as you've picked on there, this is a fucking dark story from the beginning. And I think there's a fine line between telling that dark story and also like keeping us awake and not just wanting to turn the telly off because it's too bleak. And that's why I think where the success is.
It's a fun 90s romp, and like, it's amazing that it manages to do that with all of the child abuse that's going on in the not even the background of this movie, in the foreground of this movie, and the neglect and the emotional abuse, and then the domestic abuse. I mean, it's just abuse, the movie, really. And then they turn that abuse into abusing other people, and it's... Anyway, like, if you stop to think about it, it's like, oh my God, this is such a depressing movie, but it's just so upbeat about it, which I think is, again, like the strength of what turns this from being, like, maybe an interesting documentary type movie into, like, a bit of a farce. And that again hinges on that they didn't really hurt this woman, thank God, in real life, that this Nancy Kerrigan wasn't like crippled for life or murdered, because that would suddenly the tone of the story is very different, and the fact that she was hurt but she was okay and she was able to compete in the Olympics is kind of like, it casts these people as like bungling Home Alone villains as opposed to
that's a very good way of
villains, and it's
that's very good.
Do you know what I mean? Because all of the bad guys in this, the quote unquote bad guys, and I'm saying Margot Robbie and the Winter Soldier, and the Fat Bodyguard, and even the two goons, like everyone is Joe Pesci from Home Alone. Like, everyone's incompetent. Like, no one knows what they're doing, and it's interesting that that's quite intentional. But you don't sit and think, well, this is silly. This couldn't possibly happen, because it seems like, actually, like, probably most criminals, petty criminals, are kind of quite incompetent. I
wonder if a large part of it is because, like, you guys you mentioned that you need to put this humorous sort of twist on it in order to be able to tell the story and have that sort of like that suspension of belief. Do you know what I mean? Where you can go, okay, obviously it didn't happen like that, but thereabouts, and you can get away with that. I imagine a big part of it as well is basically because, like you mentioned, Dave, there's so much darker stuff that's happened. They don't want to. They can't do this seriously, because if they do it seriously, that means they have to do it maybe a bit more accurately. And to do it a bit more accurately, maybe they leave themselves open to, possible like libel, defamation.
Yeah, and who's it for as well? If you make a serious movie about this, about Tonya Harding's life, and it's like, are you trying to drum up sympathy for this woman, or who's going to see it? Basically, is my question. Like 25 years later, who's going to see? The movie about Tonya Harding that's serious and
it wasn't a serious, like, as much. It was a circus, wasn't it? The whole thing with the assault, and like generally her media portrayal is a circus. I mean, after this, she was obviously banned from all figure skating, not by a judge though, as far as I can tell, but by the figure skating board of America, whatever. So there's lots of little things that they change just to give us a bit more of an emotional kick. But
to give you movie moments,
sure. Yes. She was then a female boxer.
We see that at the end of this movie.
God Almighty,
for a bit, and then she was like on. I think she won like America's Worst Cook or something in like 2000 and whatever, like she's part of the American media spit them up and chew them out
circus.
Well,
spit them up and chew them out. No, chew them up and spit them out.
Spit them up. That at the end of this movie, and she's like, and again, it's a movie moment, but it's the court scene. Again, we'll talk about the courtroom moment, but it's the. I dropped out of school at 15. I don't know how to do anything else. I don't have an education. I've spent my entire life becoming really good at skating. And again, none of this ever happened. But if you take that away from me, what am I going to do? And the answer is like a bit of boxing, any fucking Z grade celebrity
she
TV show
came-
you can do.
She came third on Dancing on Ice America, which is just an absolute insult. Olympian.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
there's a lot of historical stuff. I mean, it's a triple axel is the big stunt in this movie, isn't it? The big, which I'd seen this before, and I remembered being like I thought it was a flip, and I thought that can't possibly be true. No one's doing a flip in ice skates, and I was right. It wasn't a flip. That would be madness.
He's like ahead of the heels.
Yeah, and I was like, before I watched it, I was like, that can't be right. I must be thinking of something else because there's just no way. There's just no way I would be watching figure skating if that was a thing they could do.
I know how they do it,
figure
Dave.
skating.
I know how they have the skates on their feet, and they have a pair of hand skates as well with a blade. So they just
Now you're
I was going
thinking.
to say, is Dave mixing up ice skating for like that ski long jump? Dave's like, this movie's going to be terrible.
No, well, I've
Make any
seen it
sense.
before, Ross.
Fucking
I
ice
think I
skating.
can't, but I don't know what I was conflating the stunt with because I knew the stunt and it's very impressive, the triple axel. And the movie does a good job of. And here's Margot Robbie in a bathtub explaining the triple axel to you. Like the movie does a good job
exactly.
of slowing it down and explaining it, but not in a way where like we're being told about figure skating and how we don't really get told how it's scored or anything like that. It's visually quite impressive to watch. What was interesting was though that Tonya Harding was so good at this, like compared to everyone else, that for a long time she was the only person to have landed this jump in a professional competition. And when they made this movie, they literally couldn't find a stunt person who could do the jump. So they had to do it with CG because there is nobody working, and you would think like some retired. There is nobody that they could get who would do this stunt and they could film it and paste Margot Robbie's face on it in post. So like, I think that should tell you how impressive like this athlete was. You've muted yourself, Sam. How impressive this athlete was at her peak, and she was only 23 in real life when all of this was happening.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which I think the movie maybe makes you forget because Margot Robbie's 36 or whatever she is when this came out.
Yeah, or that ice skating would have advanced in 20 years, 40 years. That actually that ability was now like, oh well, yeah, it was impressive in the 80s to do that, but now because of performance enhancing drugs or whatever else, like everyone can do it. 5-year-olds can do that shit. It's still not the case, and that's amazing. That's amazing. That's a ridiculous, ridiculous thing.
And it kind of shows like
still only came third in Dancing on Ice though.
whatever else you can say about this, and this comes down to like the theory that there's a bit of a psychological debate on whether athletes are better athletes if they like Tiger Woods started playing golf at like 2 or 3 years old and then only played golf forever and then he's the best golfer. And there's an argument between that and someone like Roger Federer who didn't start playing tennis till he was 17 or something equally mad. And it's like, and which one is which one makes the... And honestly, it seems to be like sometimes someone's just a better athlete, like Tonya Harding, obviously not given all the best starts in the world, probably not
Just
a great
got that
diet,
raw
asthmatic,
genetic
and smoked,
talent.
and was one of the best people at her sport in the world at one time.
Yeah.
Mad, really.
Crazy, really crazy. So this film, like, I think there's just so much to enjoy with this movie. It's really one of those rare films that it drops you into this world of like, oh, so ice skating, that's cool, which we've covered, and then it's going through. But I think the cast of characters and the way they're presented, because we've got these like vox pop interviews that are coming up as the film goes on. Like it's also just like really well told story, so that when we're getting to know the characters, like his Tonya Harding's husband, Jeff,
Winter Soldier.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's like. So when as we're getting to know, like, you're kind of pulled into this false sense of security because you're thinking, oh, like they seem nice. I mean, yeah, they're stupid, and they're getting married, and then, or they're not quite married yet, but like they're a nice couple. They share interests, and they're both trying to escape, kind of parents who aren't particularly nice or whatever else. And then the movie's like, no, and Dolph, he starts punching her in the face, and you see this like how the cycle of abuse just goes on and on and on and through, and just the psychology of that. Now, I do have to at this point say, like, I think there's part of this movie that almost uses the her getting hit as some kind of like punchline, or making some kind of like, the trivialization of it. I think is a little bit on the edge of, okay, I understand that you want to try and keep this movie about domestic abuse light and entertaining. I do understand that, but we don't want to get fully dragged into just how depressing it is.
But also, are there some topics that you want to make light? Do you know what I mean?
I know, and I just there were points where I'm going, oh, come on.
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you could tell this story and not have it be about, do you know what I mean, and not really talk about this stuff. And I think that would be the wrong decision, because like it's quite integral to portraying this woman as like having a hard life and being a bit of an underdog, and then also like you can play into the class structure of America, and how, you know, she's never going to win all these big competitions because she's poor and all of that stuff. And then if you took out all of the actual like horrible abuse and things, and they even leave in, but they don't really look at it full in the face, the fact that she might have been like sexually assaulted by her stepbrother. Who we see briefly in the movie.
They just cast
it's a line though, isn't it? We were talking about the lightheartedness and the seriousness, and it's the line of, do you want this to be a movie about abuse, and do you want that to be what the movie's about, and exploring that, and exploring the psychological things from that, and maybe that's what informed the decision she made later on and stuff like that? Or, as this movie does, do you want to like, but you don't want to shy away from it at the same time? I think it's kind of like a Kobayashi Maru. It's a really impossible to get right or to please everyone. It didn't bother me so much, but I do know what you mean, Sam.
Well, but sorry, Ross, John, you want to come in there?
No.
Sorry. So I do think though that the movie is doing all that, and there is that fine balance. But at the same time, if you give it credit, I think the movie is also fundamentally about how this voyeurism about this woman's life is part of the story, because she even has a point in the movie where she literally says to the audience, you are the problem. You are my abuser. Exactly. Because that
was powerful.
Because we're all reveling in it, because it's a fascinating story, and it's mad and it's crazy, and it's like, so in some ways I think the movie is trying to say, by even enjoying this film, you are part of the problem, and you're supporting, like, so that's a very
that's Sam. No, because like, isn't this like, you know, maybe it's when the movie came out, but certainly like in the mid noughties, do you know what I mean? It was very, very sort of like common to sort of like really like a rail into celebrities. Now, there are some public figures that I would say, completely deserve it. But, you know, like South Park did an episode on it. You know, it's Brittany Welch. You know, when she was fucking unraveling, but you couldn't get enough pictures of her, like watching her do sort of like self sort of harming stuff. But it was like, oh, you know, and so the common person feels good about themselves. Oh, that Brittany, she's gone mad. You know, and it's that sort of thing where you are an active participant because your interest in this person's downward spiral is what spurs these fucking parasites and leeches on to get all that juicy fucking upskirt pictures bullshit.
So well said, Ross. Yeah, you are. Yeah, no,
absolutely, it's true. But I don't think any of I like the way that the violence exists in the movie. Like, rather than it being toned down, or they, you know, talking about it and not showing it, I think it kind of like, it's a part of the story, and therefore it's part of the story. I do agree, Sam, there's one or two, like you said, is maybe just whether it's treated like you say, a bit of a punchline, and that's maybe more of a filmmaking thing where it's like you know, there's a voiceover and then smack, and she's got a broken nose or whatever, and it's like, is that how we're treating it? Is it like like a Foley effect? Is that like a
Yeah,
I'm pressing
totally.
I'm pressing the beat wife button on my like radio morning show DJ
Somebody's
box?
punching
Like
That's X to beat.
a ham, in the Foley room to get the right sound of. Oh
yeah,
no,
and
that
it's
wasn't
like
quite right. Let's add some gravel there to just give a little bit more
it
bone.
sometimes feels like
just
it sometimes, and only once or twice I would say it feels like more of a bit to kind of evoke a response or to like make a line punchier than it actually is in the movie. It would have been in real life.
I think this is one of the examples, though, like, where I said earlier, where they put, like, the sort of the light spin on it, because, again, if in the movie himself, the boyfriend's character, I can't remember his name, he even said, like,
The Winter Soldier.
Yes, yeah, Bucky, yeah. Let's not go through the whole cast of Avengers.
please, there'd be too many fucking.
Like we did for Australian
This
actors.
isn't an MCU movie. Can we just not talk about the MCU for once? Jesus.
And we referred to them like outside of that scope. But in the movie, like his character even said, "Oh no, I'd never hit her. I'm much too." Did he say the word
Meek?
I think he used the word meek. Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I think that's one of those things where basically maybe publicly he's never admitted to it, So and it's never been proven. So it's one of those things where you dance right up to the line. You don't go over it where you're not making a definitive statement. It's more
Yeah, definitely. And
this was
it's all presented in that way, isn't it? Where like sometimes we have like a thing at the bottom that says such and such, or with a voiceover saying, "Well, Jeff never ever admitted to doing this, but And there's a few scenes like that as well. And then there's a few equally where, especially with the security guard friend who was called
Sean Eckhart.
who I actually think the casting of Paul Walter-Hauser is
I love
really
it.
good.
Yeah.
I the first time I watched it, I found him slightly irritating, and I was like, I wonder why they've cast him as. And then you watch the videos of the actual Sean Eckhart, and I was
At
like,
the end,
this is the same guy. They've reincarnated him in Paul
in the
Walter-Hauser.
jumper as well, because he's wearing the jumper, this like woolly jumper thing, like Christmas jumper, whatever it is. It's so. I'm like, what's such a specific piece of clothing to wear? Like what? And I thought then he must have actually bought. And then when you see it at the end, he's wearing the fucking jumper, and he looks exactly the same. Exactly the same.
But it says like there's a scene where and it shows us the video at the end where he's saying like, "Oh, I'm a CIA expert on espionage," and there's like and I can't remember whether it's a title saying he actually said this. There is video of him actually saying this, or whether it was the narrator saying, "Yeah, he actually believes this." And then at the very end, they play the video of
real life
the
interview,
documentary stuff.
It's crazy.
But you're not, and it's that I am.
It's so well studied, isn't it?
It's nasally fucking like. I
am. Yeah. It's so well studied.
Oh man.
And so again, it's like, well, there's so much of this that is it's just real, like, and that's what the movie's also willing to do. It's willing to just kind of show up actually what happened and just kind of let the audience make its mind up about that. I do think the film, though, is entirely sympathetic to Tonya Harding. Like the movie is almost a it's almost there to.
Movie. It's inspirational. It's
I would
dog beating all the odds. Wasn't
I don't know about
beating on the knees.
Yeah, I don't know about inspirational, but I think what it is what it's trying to do. I think it's trying to reform her image in some ways. I don't mean that in like, Tonya Harding's an executive producer and she had a yes or no on the script. But I think what they clearly came into the movie feeling is that Tonya Harding got a bad rap, and she got a bad rap because of all the media attention and that her husband was the one who orchestrated most of this. But also she got a bad rap because of her upbringing and because of all the other things that led to this moment.
Not inspirational, but maybe aspirational in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Especially the end note of the movie where she's boxing, and it's kind of like that. Even when you're beaten, get up again, and it's kind of like it's a nothing line actually in relation to her life. And I'm sure she's happy enough, and she's remarried and all of that. But she also kind of never became, she was no longer an Olympic athlete. So
I wasn't getting the thing of like, oh, get back up and fight. It's sort of like an American thing. What I inferred from that was she can't do the sport that that she has this great sort of talent for, that she's worked incredibly hard for, and she has a passion for. And so, she is an athlete, and so she's doing other things that she can basically exploit her sort of physical ability for. So hence the boxing, and like Sammy mentioned, like, all these sort of like celebrity stuff. I didn't take it as like, oh, what an inspiration. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, Dave, but I took it more as like, okay, I can do this for a bit until my body gives out, and then I'll go on to the next thing. It was a bit depressing.
It is, but at the same time, it's got the beats of a sports movie in a way that I think.
Yeah, in the same way, $1 Million Baby had a fucking like sports.
Let me finish.
I think you're right, Dave. I think you're right.
The beats of the movie are kind of like recognizable. It's part of the reason why the movie is so fun to watch, is because it kind of it's Rocky. It's that, and it's not the same, obviously, because
it's the highs and lows.
Everyone's much less likable and things, but you've got the highs and the lows. You've got the absolute banging soundtrack. I think the soundtrack of this film is fantastic. It's just it's that Guardians thing, though, isn't it? Let's just pump a load of like decade specific music into this movie and it'll be fantastic. And I'm like, well, it works. Like, you can't argue with the results. Yeah. But it's fun and it's punchy and it's just a bit of a jaunt. And so by the end of the movie, you like Tonya Harding, you like Robbie's performance, and you like her character, and you kind of like, and the emotional scene in the courtroom, which is a total fabrication. It is effective, and she is upset, and you do understand why she's upset, because you're watching anyone who's built their entire life around something being told, well, you can't do that anymore. And then it's and then after that, it's I was the most hated woman in America, and then she said, and then I got up the next day and I kept on living. And that, I think that's something about that is aspirational, that I had all this shit and everyone in the country and nay, the world hated me and was baying for my blood. And then I got up the next day and I said, right, boxing or whatever. But that's what I mean by aspiration.
You keep going and you know why this why you care so much about Tonya Harding is because Margot Robbie is fucking amazing in this film. Like it
she
is. I think
a lot like the Joker for vast swathes of this movie.
Yeah,
like,
the 80s,
Harley Quinn.
The 80s makeup.
There's something about how pale she is and how.
But hold on. We're not talking about appearance. We're talking about her acting ability. Because I think this is an Oscar-winning performance for me. She was nominated, but she didn't win. I think this is an Oscar-winning performance.
The pinnacle thing for me, I'm just going to interrupt you here, Sam. The pinnacle thing for me is that scene before. It's like near the end of the movie, before she goes on to skate, and she, after what's her name, got her kneecaps busted, and she's about to go on to skate. That's the one. Thank you. And she can't get the laces right, and she's preparing, and she puts that, like you mentioned, the makeup on her cheeks and everything, and you see she's about to break down. Obviously, the stress of like she's about to get caught or whatever, and she's trying to put on like, I call it like the pageant face, and it's like it's smiling, but it's smiling with your mouth and not your eyes.
Yeah,
and so
it's good face acting. I hate that. I hate and love that we use that term so often because surely all acting is face acting, but it's good face acting. By which I mean the camera is just there and you are expected to do a performance just
very good, Ross. Very good. Thank you.
Speaking of pageants and Oscars, can we talk about the real MVP of this movie?
No, we're not done on Margot Robbie yet. Nowhere near, because all the way through this movie,
me all the time, man.
I'm not blocking you, but we can't just move on from this performance.
Peacock, Sam, you got to let him fly.
Because he will fly in a minute. Because all the way through this film, it's so wacky, it's so over exaggerated that I think unless you have a caliber of actor like Margot Robbie and Alison Janney, who we'll come to in just a few seconds, I really think you are going to struggle to sell the entire concept of this movie, because if you don't have someone who like, she embodies the character so well that you, in that wonderful movie way, you forget that you are watching Margot Robbie. You name the top actors of all time. There's very few where you just completely forget who the actor is and you're completely bought in to what the character portraying. And I think without that, this film is a total failure, because you would just be like, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. And Alison Janney has the exact same thing as well. Dave, go on, please. I'm welcoming you to the floor to tell us about this.
I love Alison Janney, and I feel like she gets a bum rap. I think she should be considered one of our preeminent actors.
For our viewers at home, who's Alison Janney?
The mother.
The mother, yeah.
Oh wow!
Who won an Oscar for best supporting
I was watching this,
actor
and Margot Robbie is really good. Don't get me wrong; she's in a load of excellent movies, and she is a fantastic actor. Like, just generally very, very skilled, and evidently puts loads into every performance. Unfortunately, she's also in all of those DC movies, so that will be what she's remembered for, I think, which is a real shame. But hey.
It bought that house.
Put a fourth wing on that house.
Exactly. Michael Caine.
Four wings on
Michael
the house. And Alison Janney, though, I think is just the queen of understatement. We did Drop Dead Gorgeous. I think you may have missed that episode, Ross, which is the pageant black comedy. And Alison Janney is in that as the sort of
she's like
character.
This. She's like this.
Except in that movie, in that goofy black comedy movie, she's really supportive and
she's really nice,
and nice. But in this movie, she is the devil. But in a really
horrendous.
What I would refer to as like usual evil, like not even evil, but just usual nastiness,
mundane.
Like, she's just a totally mundane Batman villain. She's like, in a way,
whose sole purpose is to destroy her daughter's life.
Yeah, exactly. Something good happens, and her instant reaction is like, right, well, I'm just going to say something nasty about her boyfriend, or I'm just going to call her fat, or imply that she's going to be pregnant in 6 months, or
you fuck dumb. You don't marry
dumb.
Whore,
basically.
Jesus.
Yeah. And you're like,
see, I think this is,
but it's all delivered so well, and it's such a well-formed character. Even though I think in a lesser actor's hands, this is probably a bit of like a forgettable role in the movie, because actually in terms of the actual plot, not after she's a grown up, the impact is minimal in terms of her effect on the story. But I think that Janney brings such a characterization to it that every time she's on screen, I just can't look away from what she's doing, and she absolutely deserved the Oscar she got for this performance.
It's also believable as well. And this is the thing that I think, if you got Meryl Streep to do this, right, I think it'd be great. But I think it would be elevated in a way that this role cannot have. I think this has to be it has to be like really, really grounded in reality, and it has to feel like that every time she speaks, she's spitting that venom, and you almost have to feel like that you're being attacked, and that it's so visceral.
Not every actor is capable of being this despicable.
No.
Unless they're a Batman. That's why I said Batman villain, because it's kind of like this mundane nastiness and general horribleness, and lots of parents are like this. And
then you put Alison Janney, you put Margot Robbie together, right? And you're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. These actors playing off each other, and you can fucking feel it. You can fucking feel it in this movie. And the only problem is it makes everyone else look particularly mediocre. And I think
especially because you cast Sebastian Stan, who I think is bang average. I think this guy is fine. He's got a nice chin, I guess, but like he's just beige.
This is Jeff, isn't it?
He's actually fine in this movie. I think he's elevated by the other cast.
I think he is drowning in this film. Especially as soon as he's next to Margot Robbie, which is obviously a lot. He doesn't really get many scenes with Alison Janney, but
his talking heads are alright. I will say, like I said, he's doing a nice job, and he's obviously well directed.
It's fine.
And you didn't need this to be DiCaprio. Do you know what I mean? It was fine for this to be.
I don't think DiCaprio could compete with this. This is the caliber of performance, I think. From
I'm not saying, but you shouldn't need to compete. It shouldn't need to be a draw.
No, but they have to be the same.
It's rise up to the challenge. You know what I mean? Like, they've raised the bar. Come meet them.
Yeah,
yeah,
and they just can't.
Obviously, Sebastian Stan isn't doing that.
Yeah,
the most forgettable actor in the MCU. That's right. Yes.
Paul Waterhauser playing Sean, I think he's doing a better job because he's doing something that's
He owns the role more.
funnier, and so it's almost wound up more. It's almost kind of exaggerated more. Whereas
tell you what he does really well is it's the delusion, and that because obviously it'd be really tempting, really easy to really yuck it up for the laughs. Do you know what I mean? To like really sort of like lean into this grandeur. I'm a bodybuilder sort of thing. I'm an Adonis, but the way they do it is like really subtle. So like after the attack, and the husband Jeff, goes to confront Sean. And he's like, "This wasn't the plan. What are you doing?" And he basically says, "No, it is the plan." But he never directly addresses, like whenever Jeff challenges him, he never directly addresses it. He just goes on about how he has this big plan, 4 steps ahead. It's all coming together, because obviously that's the illusion he built in his head. And it's again, this is what I'm saying when I said it'd be really tempting just to yuck it up and really sort of go for the lowest sort of hanging fruit. And just, you can make jokes and make the character look like a moron, but he's
They
going.
kind of do.
But there's a balance struck there, because he's not a moron on a base level. He's a moron because he's not all there. He believes
it's a really solid characterization, and that's the basis of a good performance is knowing who you're playing, and Hauser seems to have a good handle on. Like, this is the character, and he's not, like you said, Ross, he's not like mentally deficient. He's just like deluded, and like I said, the delusion is, he's obviously not a genius either, but he's not any stupider than Sebastian Stan in this movie. Yet he's just like living in his own world.
Can I move us on just slightly, because I think another negative for me in this movie. And we talk about he's deluded and all these other things, and all the characters live in this bubble of just fucking, what are you doing? And I think the movie is like, take a look at these poor people, aren't they thick as shit? Mm-hmm. And that all the way through the movie, like, I think we're kind of laughing at them, and it's kind of sneering at saying, in the way that Drop Dead Gorgeous, which is such a good comparison to this in terms of the tone and obviously the mockumentary style, it's highlighting, look at the poverty that these people live in, and look at the redneck yokel ways that they live. But it's kind of like, maybe not respectful, but it's also not just pointing and laughing at this. And I think this movie is sneering at how poor these people are, which is exactly what America did to Tonya Harding. It's exactly what the judges did, and everyone did. And I think, again, I would have enjoyed it more, I think, if there was just a little bit of that edge removed. And one specific and maybe insignificant example is that when you've got the interviews with Tonya Harding later on, if you look behind her, there's dirty dishes in a sink, and her kitchen kind of looks a bit naff, and I just think maybe that's what it looked like on tape, whenever it is, and I know it's a very trivial thing, but I think what it says is, I think it's just a little bit of a kind of microaggression almost of like, she doesn't clean up. She doesn't clean up.
I get what you're saying.
You know what that means. You know what that means.
At the same time, it's nice not to have the virtuous poor. And I'm going to elaborate on that, because we get this in all media, really. And even in Drop Dead Gorgeous, I'm kind of sick of the idea that, and it's not necessarily even untrue, and it's great and it's fun. It's like they're slobs versus snobs, but the slobs are just good, nice, gregarious, thoughtful, kind, generous people. And it's like, well, no, actually, like, people come in all shapes and sizes, and some poor people are total dickheads, and some rich people are total dickheads. And yes, more rich people are total dickheads than poor people are total dickheads. But still, there's a divide. Your income doesn't necessarily affect your, chances of becoming a total arsehole. So in a way, I actually like that this is a more realistic look at maybe the things with the dishes, Sam, make more towards your point, but especially in the early movie where she is poor and, like, she's a bit of an arsehole, and she is hunting, and she's rude, and she's brash, and she's a bit gauche and a bit tasteless. Like, I think it all goes towards being a bit more realistic to, like, yes, poor people exist in America. It's fine. It's okay. You don't need to be afraid. And a part of that is they don't have to have like an antagonist in this movie. Really, there isn't really an antagonist in this movie. The husband sometimes, and the mother sometimes, and the Olympic Committee sometimes. But like, there's no rich skater that she's constantly competing with who constantly beats her. I think they do a really good job of anonymizing.
Even Nancy Kerrigan isn't. You're right. Yeah,
she's not really a character and it's a really good way because it is Tonya. This isn't like ice skating. It's Tonya. It's about Tonya Harding. And yes, I agree, Sam, that some of the poor stuff and some of the poverty stuff is a bit like, hey, get a load of this redneck. But I think some of it is just, it's quite refreshing to actually acknowledge that poor people live in poverty and that's fine. And some of them are arseholes and some of them aren't. And
so really
maybe
good.
We should just address just the breadth of society rather than having these tropes, which we have because they're fun. Everyone loves the slobs versus snobs trope. The 80s loved it, especially.
It's a really well put point, Dave, and I think it shows how you can have different interpretations, and that goes to the strengths of this film as well. Because, as we've said, the point where she says you're an abuser, and so again, almost by the point of watching this film, you are contributing to it, and with this podcast right now is contributing to the abuse of Tonya Harding because no, seriously, I think it is because it's about representation. It's how the media represents people, and the movie's kind of feeding on that, propagating it, but also at the same time saying, "Look what you're doing," turn the mirror back to the audience. So. Complex filmmaking, and it was just really, really such an enjoyable film, to get into.
It's just fun.
It's one of those. No, it's one of those because obviously I knew the movie was about, and I loosely knew about the situation, that about the assault and everything. I didn't know it was sort of like it came with this certain level of brevity. And I went into this, expecting like a really gritty sort of true to life sort of thing, based on true events. But and like I mentioned before, those first 20, 25 minutes, it's really heart wrenching, and I was like, and because you don't really get much of the humor.
Watching a real crier.
Yeah, you don't get much of the movie sort of like brevity or humor then. And I was actually considering, can I watch another hour and a half of this, because fucking hell, life's too short. But I'm glad I stuck with it. It was a very good watch.
Yeah, I can totally understand what you mean, Ross, because we do recommend what even was the name of that really depressing 14th century French rape movie we watched?
Oh God, I fucking repressed that. Who was that?
The Last Duel. Anyway,
who was that? Which one of you did that to me?
So we have recently had oh God, it's going to be a slog, and this kind of movie, Ross. Like the other one that comes to mind because it's so cold again is The Revenant. I don't know if you've seen that, the Leo DiCaprio film.
It's not happening, is it?
Because it's just torture porn. It's just torture porn 100%. And Oscar fodder, and it's and it's great. It's fantastic, and you feel all sorts of things and emotions, and you come away and then you forget about it because it's just got absolutely no reason value whatsoever.
Icing, no cake. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas this is just, it's all cake, baby. It's so fun. I think
poor people cake.
Yes, some of that. But also it's fun. It's good. I love the design of it. I love the look of it. The costumes and generally the 90s aesthetic is obviously totally false in the way that the 80s nostalgia has recreated the 80s in a much brighter and less depressing way, and that's fine because we enjoy it, and that's okay. That's totally fine to have this imaginary aesthetic, and we've got the same for the 60s and the 70s and all of that, and I just love the look of it. I love the sound of it. I love the way that the movie's paced. So apart from that, I agree, Ross, that the opening, more or less until we get to meet Margot Robbie, all the stuff before that, I think is a bit more of a let's just get through it. And then as soon as Robbie's in the movie, I think the pacing between all the different scenelets with the interviews and the voiceovers and the way that time moves, and I think we get the skatings also we we get enough skating, but not so much that I'm like, right, can we do the?
You're not getting numb
bit?
to it, are you? Because there's only so much you can kind of really enjoy.
Yeah, we don't get a 45-minute competition montage, which is usually what kills sports movies. Really, is like, and it's the sport, and it's like I tried to watch Draft Day the other week, and which is about American football.
I'm really disappointed.
And I watched like 20 minutes of it, and I was like, and that was part of the opposite problem. Really, I was like, well, there's no football. What am I even doing? I'm watching
it's the
NFL
most boring
staffers.
part of the NFL. It's the most boring part of the NFL, which is the draft. Who cares?
That's the trouble with a sports movie, is you kind of need to balance that of like, the reason it's interesting is because it's a sports personality and this like assault thing, which is this like, it seems like this mad, it seems like it was written for Hollywood, this story, and to bring that to the screen and have it not be depressing and have it not be upsetting and have it not be like a really dark sort of like Zodiac Killer-esque film, you know, like a stupid Zodiac Killer, but like to have it be all of that is really, really good. My only one quibble, and it's really minor, is, and it's not even as bad with Sebastian Stan, but I think when they're asking, when Margot Robbie is 15 and they make a point of saying in the scene that she's 15, and I'm like, now I'm looking at a 35-year-old Margot Robbie who's already stretching it playing a 23-year-old, just to be perfectly honest. And now she's 15, and that's fine. It's fine. But, like, maybe just don't say you're 15. Maybe just don't.
She
say
sells
you're a
it,
teenager.
though. She sells it.
Yes. Because there's scenes between her and Jeff, you know, when the Swiss playing those 15-year-olds, and the awkwardness that they both sort of display. Like, obviously, when they each want to kiss the other, and you know he doesn't make a move, and you can see that frustration on her, but also in a vocabulary. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, I couldn't sort of quote now, but like it's something along the lines of, I can't remember it, but like,
so are you into me or not, or like, do you like me, or do you like me, or whatever it is? Yeah.
Yes, and it was just like grammatically incorrect things that you would say as a teenager, because you know what to say, and you know, words are words.
Another example, though, where Robbie is just shitting all over everyone else in the scene, just completely owning and making everyone else look like absolute amateurs. It's making me lose my voice.
Again,
it's so
like,
impressive.
he's not got a very big toolbox when it comes to acting. I've seen him in enough stuff to know that he's
we're not
fine.
big fans of Seb.
No, honestly,
Ross,
honestly, I think he's fine as the
That's
third
the
guy in the movie.
Just
as
don't.
the third guy in the movie.
No, what you don't.
That's like the lowest honor we bestow upon people in this podcast.
No, he is fine.
He's completely
He's fine, Ross. He's okay. He's not terrible.
Just
Like,
don't
he's good
put
looking,
him.
and that gets him work. But like,
Dave.
You're asking
Just
him to
don't
carry
cast
something
him.
here.
Just don't cast him
in movies.
No.
yeah, don't cast him in any more movies.
Take this.
I certainly don't want to watch any more bank loan scenes with Sebastian Stan.
Don't cast him against Margot Robbie. Don't cast him against one of the best, actresses that we've got in Hollywood, because I just think you're not going to win that battle. You're not going to win it.
No.
So, well, this was a delight. This was a.
It's a fun movie. It was the same. I want to say, was it the same director as, what else has he done?
Cruella. Previous episode listener.
That's also got Paul Walter Hauser in it.
Yeah. This is one of those really good movies.
Which is also, I really like Cruella as well. I can't remember who was on the podcast. One of you didn't like it.
I didn't.
Yeah. I thought that was a good film.
I love that movie.
It's fun, but it does mean though. Now we've done like
Cruella podcast. You can refer to our last podcast where Ross wasn't on, so it's fine.
We've done so many good episodes in a row. We are probably due for an absolute clunker, just to really keep Ross on his toes. And I think that's probably what's coming up next.
Gun in my mouth.
Considering this was my pick. This was my pick, and I made a good pick.
Oh, I can't wait for it.
Boom. So we'll be back with something probably not as good as this, featuring actors not as good as this, and
maybe even Sebastian Stan. Who knows? Stay tuned.
Maybe as good as Sebastian Stan. It's a low bar.
We can do that Captain America movie. Yes. More MCU hate.
No more MCU. Fucking, that's on superheroes. We're on the fucking back burner.
On the back burner, he says.